Good evening, I'm Pinky Webb. Tonight we ask the questions, we tackle the issues, we clarify matters, and we get on point. The National Bureau of Investigation is set to begin its probe into statements issued by Vice President Sara Duterte, particularly on having the first couple and the Speaker of the House killed if she herself is assassinated. The Justice Department takes this very seriously, saying VP Duterte may have uttered grave threats or violated the anti-terror law. The DOJ also says the Vice President's father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, may also face serious charges for encouraging members of the military to question their loyalty to the Commander-in-Chief. Let's get on point with Justice Undersecretary Jesse Andres. Yusek Andres, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras and thank you for being here in the studio.
Yes, good evening, Pinky, and good evening to all our televiewers.
Siguro just for transparency, we were supposed to have you and then at some point, hindi sana matutuloy dahil naging busy kayo, ano po?
That's correct.
At nakahabol ho kayo. Would you be able to tell us what made you busy today? Because it has something to do with what will happen tomorrow.
Well, you will see the news tomorrow. I probably gave 7 or 9 interviews already, similar to this. And we were surprised that Congress, at the last minute this afternoon, decided to cancel their committee hearing to give way to the NBI investigation of VP Sara tomorrow morning. So I had to regroup with our people with NBI just to prepare for the investigation proper. And from there, I struggled to come here. But because this is an important topic, this is an important house I'm talking to.
Thank you, sir.
I am here with all the efforts.
So, hindi ho kayo nakiusap sa Kongreso para ipagpaliban yung hearing para matuloy po yung summon or ano ba tawag sa NBI pag magpakita po si VP Sara?
It's a subpoena for an investigation.
Investigation na po ang tawag. Okay. Nakiusap po ba kayo sa Kongreso?
Yeah. Early on this morning, I gave also an interview saying that the NBI's first hearing of investigation would not be tomorrow because there is already a congressional hearing set for tomorrow. That's why I was totally surprised when Congress, knowing that there would be an NBI investigation, decided to give way. So that, they think that the NBI investigation is more important than the present committee hearing.
So hindi ho kayo nakiusap?
Hindi. We were actually surprised and we were hoping that it would be next week because we are already giving way, but we had to, make the preparations because as of today, this hour, we have not received any letter or communication from the Vice President that she is not attending.
So it's still up in the air if the Vice President will show up tomorrow or not?
Well, we're expecting that she would be there because she properly received the subpoena and we did not receive any information on her request for a rescheduling.
So she most possibly will be there. What happens if she doesn't show up, sir?
Yeah, I told everybody that we have to, allow some flexibility on the schedule of the Vice President. If she would request another date, we would have granted it. But right now, we have not received any request for postponement. So tuloy bukas, we are prepared. And this initial investigation is actually for her. As you hear in her statements, she has repeatedly said that there is also a threat on her life. And we want also to get to the bottom of this. We want to understand who gave this threat, when was this threat given, and whether this was properly recorded in a police blotter so that we can make follow-up investigations. On our side, we reviewed the records, and on the NBI, there was no such report. And the PNP, we asked some units, and they said they have not received at this point any report of a threat to the Vice President. But we will hear her.
Yeah. If there was a threat, because the Vice President did say there's a threat to her life, kanino ho ba siya dapat una magsabi?
Sa akin, in every office, there is always a security officer. That's why the Vice President has, I think, more than 200 security personnel, but for sure there is a chief security officer. I was also with the Office of the Vice President before. I was also a chief of staff. That's why I know. But back then, we only had 36 police personnel assigned to us as security. So
Back then?
yes.
Did you have confidential funds back then?
No such thing as confidential funds. We had a little social fund that we used, but the total budget was 250 million. So now I think they have 4 times more budget. And the security officer would have reported this. And hopefully, the chief of staff would have known that NBI is the proper authority to investigate a situation like this, where a threat to the vice president is, possible.
Yeah. To those who might be wondering, I'm not sure if you said it, but you were the chief of staff of the vice president, and we're talking about Vice President Noli de Castro.
Yes.
Just for context, for those who might not have known that. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back to my question. What if the vice president doesn't show up tomorrow? What happens? Hearing canceled.
Well, as far as I know, the NBI would be giving her a possible next setting. But as you know, we cannot, we don't want to exacerbate the situation and, try to cause the arrest of the vice president in defiance of a subpoena. Because,
can you arrest her if she doesn't show up tomorrow?
I will have to say, just to point out a particular provision of law in the revised penal code, that a defiance of a subpoena or a valid summons will incur also some criminal liability in the nature of obstruction of justice. But we're not looking at that at the moment because we think that the vice president will fully cooperate. And at the same time, as I said, this particular investigation is meant also to thresh out the possible threats to her. And we will investigate everything from the start. When did this threat come? Was it before she became a vice president? Before she, resigned as DepEd secretary? Or was it even before? We do not know. We want to find out.
Yeah, but what I want to find out is if she doesn't show up tomorrow, is there going to be leeway? Will the NBI say we will reschedule this to another date? And if so, what is that date? I'm sure you talked about it because you prepared a while ago.
I am in touch with the NBI, and my guidance to them, being the undersecretary in charge of the NBI, is to give some flexibility to the vice president. But maybe another setting. If one setting is not enough for the investigation, we can have several settings.
What do you mean by setting?
Opportunities.
Hearings.
A meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
It will be not really a hearing because it will be a closed-door thing. I'm sure media would want to pry into the meeting, but we will not allow it. The media should know we will not allow you to be there because when the vice president would give certain disclosures on possible individuals who might be the cause of threats, then we have to be discreet about it because we have to operate and find out and quell the threat if needed. So we cannot allow our steps to be preempted.
Yusek, who will be part of the investigation, that closed-door meeting?
Yeah, yesterday in a press conference, I announced that there is already a particular task force assigned for this purpose in the NBI, and we know their particular names, but we are not disclosing it at this time. But at least 5 NBI agents, lawyers, will be assigned, and they will be part of the investigation team that will, talk to the vice president, get information from her. And there are 2 important things that we will tackle tomorrow. First and foremost is the security of the vice president. We want to get information from her on who could possibly be the source of threats. So, ang dami naming itatanong dyan. From start, where did this happen? Who are the possible individuals? And, people get entangled with many things when you are in public service. In Davao, she was a mayor. And of course, she had a drive, anti-drug drive, anti-gambling drive. Maybe she had some, disputes with people that were disciplined, corrected by law. And that could be a possible source of threat. She is a politician. All politicians are, exposed to being an enemy of one and a friend to another one. There was the local elections where she could have endorsed people, candidates, and maybe people are not happy. So everything.
And what is number 2?
Number 2 is getting to know the identity of the person she talked to. People have been saying that everything is conditional. That's why we should not look upon the Vice President as having committed criminal acts. But I'm just making a distinction. It's not just a thought that came to the mind of the Vice President that, if something happens to me, I will do something about it. The thing that we gathered from her own admission in the videotape was exactly her statement that I talked to a particular individual.
May nakausap ako.
May nakausap ako at sinabi ko doon sa kausap ko na kapag ako ay namatay, kailangan patayin din niya ang tatlong opisyales, Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, First Lady Liza Araneta, and Speaker Martin Romualdez. So,
No joke, no joke.
No joke, no joke. And the one he was talking to said yes. He agreed.
And sabi pa niya, tapusin natin, not verbatim, was that siguraduhin mong mamatay sila. May ganun. Sila.
Yeah, mamatay sila.
Tapos
And
ang
he
sagot
said
sa
yes.
akin, yes ma'am. Parang ganun.
Yun po ang difference. We want to make that clear distinction. It was just a thing that she was thinking about. She took an initial step to accomplish it by talking to an individual. And that individual is someone we need to identify. And if we are able to see this individual, we will get, a bigger picture what is really behind all of this.
And you're confident that the Vice President will tell you who this person is?
Well, there's always hope. We will give her the opportunity. Anything goes. If she says this is the truth, then we will accept it. If she says that this is a metaphor, then we will see. We will put it in proper context.
I guess, maybe to be very frank about it, who in his or her right mind would actually identify the person that you contracted to actually kill the President, the First Lady, and the House Speaker if I get killed?
Well, you'll never know. You'll never know. Strange things happen.
Okay. Conditional or active threat, you brushed upon that a while ago, but that's something that we need to discuss. Just very quickly, when we return, our discussion with Justice Undersecretary Jesse Andres continues in a moment. Stay tuned. This is On Point. Welcome back. You're watching On Point. Still with us, Justice Undersecretary Jesse Andres. Very quickly, and I've discussed this with Attorney Salvador Panelo also and other resource people, Yusek, active and conditional threat. Conditional nga daw kasi hindi naman daw mangyayari kung hindi siya mamatay. It's premised on may banta sa buhay niya at hindi naman po ito mangyayari kung hindi siya namatay, or I think the more appropriate term would be pinatay.
Okay. So, on the aspect of conditional threat, well, our basis is the revised penal code. Grave threats under the revised penal code punishes even a conditional threat. I'll give you an example. If I tell you, pag hindi ka sumunod sa usapan natin, papatayin kita. It's a condition. Pag tumupad ka, hindi kita papatayin. Pag hindi ka tumupad, papatayin kita. Nonetheless, it's a threat because that falls under the chapter on crimes against liberty and security of persons. The moment you issue that threat, the person is already disturbed in his person and liberty and his security. So the evil sought to be prevented already happened. Whether it's conditional or not, that's why it is also being punished. And again, the fact that it is an active threat, it is based on the fact that it is coming from a high-ranking official, a political figure with power and influence that could possibly execute the threat. Yung ibang tao na walang kakayahan, maybe you will take it lightly. She is the daughter of a past president. She is a powerful official.
She's the Vice President.
And she has power. She has resources. So it's a different matter.
Pero
it is an active threat against the president.
But Yusek, because you're talking about the revised penal code, is there anything in law or there that states active and conditional? Meron ho bang ganung mga salita? Or is this just made up by all these lawyers that we're speaking?
These are operational matters for security people, active, inactive threat. But it is an active threat because it has not been addressed. Right now, we do not know the identity, whether that individual understood the instruction or not. we do not know. Whether he has other accomplices, co-conspirators,
All right.
we do not know. That's why it's there.
So that grave threat is there, no? That issue on possible grave threat. But there's also another thing that is part of the subpoena that was given to or issued to the Vice President, which talks about the anti-terror law. Bakit ho ba yung naging press conference ni VP Sara ay pwedeng pumasok sa anti-terror law?
Yeah. Okay. So good. Your question is on point. We have to clarify. We have to make a distinction. A violation of the anti-terror law doesn't mean that you have been designated as a terrorist. Ang sinasabi ng iba nag-argumento, hindi naman po terorista si Vice President. No. There is a different crime for that. If you are a terrorist, there is a procedure for you to be designated as a terrorist, and that should be under the Anti-Terrorism Council.
Yung ATC po.
And there will be consequences that the Vice President was saying about confiscation of assets, freezing of accounts,
Tama po.
and even possible cancellation of password. That is not the crime that we are looking at. She is not being designated as a terrorist in that sense of designation.
I see.
However, there are particular offenses outlined in the law. This law is a very strong law, a very powerful law, which was passed during the
time of
presidency
President Duterte.
of PRRD, Duterte.
I think 2022, if I'm not mistaken. This was passed in 2022. And opposed by a number of groups.
I think earlier. So,
I'm sorry, 2022 is Marcos na po. 2020 ata po.
Yes.
Okay.
So the law is intended to protect the entire populace from terrorist acts. So you can imagine what is the evil sought to be prevented. It is attack on the populace, innocent population, where terrorism can happen through many things. Cooperation, the whole world is subject to possible terrorist attacks. So that's why it's very important. And that is why the law includes particular acts. Whether or not the terrorist act has been committed, it is already made punishable, like a proposal to commit terrorism and a conspiracy between two people to commit terrorism is already punishable, even if the terrorist act has not been commenced or executed. So, mabigat po itong batas na ito.
So, saan po pumapasok yung ginawang press conference ni VP Sara dito sa anti-terror law?
Yes.
Alin po doon
I
sa
have to
kanyang
point
sinabi?
out the particular section, Section 4 of the anti-terror law, which provides that whenever a person engages in acts that is intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person and endangers a person's life in the context of intimidation and to create an atmosphere to spread fear. So you can imagine that the person that is subject of the threat is the sitting president. The intimidation and the fear that could possibly be sown in the populace would be very apparent because he is the chief executive. Anarchy will follow if anything happens to the president. And you can imagine the threat is coming from the vice president, who is the potential beneficiary of the death of the president. Can the country accept the vice president to succeed in power when she is suspected to have caused the death of the sitting president? That will create anarchy. That's why we believe that we will have to make a thorough investigation, give everybody a chance to adduce more evidence, but at the end of the day, we think these provisions, which do not really require overt acts of commission of terrorist acts, making this basis of the liability is very easy.
Doon po dun sa definition ng terrorism, which we were showing, no? Under it, there's letter A, B, C, D, E.
Yes.
I think what you're referring to, sir,
Letter
is
A.
dito sa letter A only.
Yes.
If we can flash that again,
Yes.
letter A, so that our viewers can see it. But terrorism says it's subject to Section 49 of this Act. Terrorism is committed by any person who, within or outside the Philippines, regardless, yun po yung sinasabi niya, stage of the execution. You're saying dito po siya pasok. Possibly,
That's
engages in acts intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person or endangers a person's life. Sir, what's the difference of this and murder?
Well, murder is just directed at an individual, and that's not intended to sow fear and will not cause disruption, destabilization of the country or a segment thereof. dito, even a segment thereof, even a community, can be the subject of a terrorist concern. It need not be the whole country. So if you look at the wordings, even a segment of the population that is disturbed will constitute terrorism.
I'm
and
sorry,
regardless
sir, no?
of the
nakasulat
stage
yung,
of execution.
Saan ho nakasulat yung sinabi mong that it might affect a sector
Here.
of society?
When the purpose of such act, by its nature, is to intimidate the general public or a segment thereof.
Can we cut there, sir? That means you're basically saying, I don't know if this is a bit of a stretch, that if the president is killed.
Yes.
Okay. But we are presupposing, sir, that the vice president is already killed. Paano ho yun?
No.
Hindi po.
The fact of whether the vice president was killed or not is immaterial. We cannot look at that. Those are just words. But the fact that this matter was partially executed already, meaning the plan to assassinate the president was already commenced by the engagement of a particular individual upon the own admission of the Vice President in our statement.
Kasi, sir, sorry to interrupt you.
Alright.
Ang hirap po kasi siguro din tanggapin yung or intindihin yung commenced. Kasi commenced, ibig sabihin po nun, nangyari. Pero yun nga po yung pinaglalaban ni VP Sara. No? I hope
Yes.
we can look into this and understand it better. It will not commence unless she is killed. Yun po yung kanyang pinaglalaban.
I understand what you're saying. That is why we are saying it will not fall under Section 4A because this is the actual commission of terrorism.
Okay.
So it will fall under another provision that mentions that even if you have a proposal that will amount to Section 4, it is already punishable.
Nasaan po yun?
Yeah, 5, 6, and 7.
So mali yung pinakita natin kanina na letter A, hindi po yun na magiging basehan.
Section 6, Section 5 is threat to commit terrorism. It is committed by any person who shall threaten to commit, threaten lang to commit any of the acts mentioned in Section 4. So at the same time, Section 6, planning.
Actually,
Kahit
you
hindi
can
pa
just...
ginagawa,
Okay.
it's already punishable. 7, conspiracy. When 2 or more people discuss the possible plan, it need not be executed. Kasi you cannot punish something that is executed because it has already caused the disaster we're trying to prevent. That's why even before it happens, it is already made punishable and actionable to protect the state and the citizens.
Sabihin po natin, pasok po dito sa anti-terror law, yung naging threats of the Vice President. When you said that the Vice President had a press conference and talked about this will amount to her assets being frozen, etc., and AMLAC. Let's just bring that statement made by the Vice President.
Gusto nila mag-cancel ng passport. Gusto nila mag-red notice sa international. So, hindi ka makakagalaw overseas. Gusto nila mag-AMLAC. Anti-money laundering violations. So, ibig sabihin nun, i-freeze nila yung pera mo at yung properties mo. Hindi ka makakagastos ng pera at hindi ka makakapasok sa properties mo. At gusto nila mag-issue ng mga search warrants. Anong ginagawa nun? Papasukin nila yung properties mo.
So, that's a statement made by the Vice President. Yusek, so yun ho bang mangyayari? I know you touched upon this a while ago, but let's clarify that.
The Vice President is way ahead, steps ahead of us. As I earlier said, we are not looking at designating her as a terrorist. That is a different matter. We are not moving towards that, and that will take a different process. If that happens, the consequences mentioned by the Vice President may happen. Yung confiscation account, canceling ng passport, etc. But that is not the point. There are other provisions of the anti-terror law which have been possibly violated.
So she will not be designated as a terrorist. Now, let's
at this
just
point,
say...
no.
At this point, meron po pa kayong at this point.
We have to understand the whole scenario. At this point, we have no evidence. We have no inclination that she is a terrorist. No, there's no evidence at hand. That's why we are saying that. But
But you're not even saying that it's impossible that the Vice President could be designated as a terrorist.
It's not for me to make that conclusion. It's always based on evidence that will be gathered if it is there.
What is the consequence, sir, of if she is charged under the anti-terror law? What are the consequences of that if found guilty?
Yeah, it depends on which provision will be invoked or used in the charge sheet against the accused. So if it is terrorism itself, it is a non-bailable offense, reclusion perpetua, life imprisonment. But as I said, it is not Section 4 apparent at this time, but other provisions that refer to proposal to commit terrorism or conspiracy
Planning.
to commit terrorism or even planning.
And dito po, you're talking about sections 5, 6, and 7, tama ho ba?
That's right,
So,
up to 8.
up to 8. What is the punishment if found guilty of violating either sections 5, 6, 7, or 8?
Well, I'm sorry that I could not say it, but it's around 12 years. 12 years
I see.
imprisonment.
And what about
The important thing that maybe people should know as well, so as to discourage anything of this sort in the future, is part of the penalty of an individual who would be found guilty of violating the Anti-Terrorism Act and being a public official is perpetual disqualification from public
If found
office.
guilty.
So, people who are even found guilty of an offense here, who are politicians, will have to end their career
tapos na po yun?
because it may contain, of course the judge is the final person who with the discretion to make that decision to add the accessory penalty of perpetual disqualification. But the law and the implementing rules of the anti-terror law provide for that possibility.
I see that possibility, but it's still going to be the call of the
discretion
decision.
of the judge.
All right. I need to move on to President Rodrigo Duterte, former President Rodrigo Duterte, sir, when he challenged the military, basically saying that will you still support a president who is a drug addict for the next 4 years? There's a lot of talk about it. Is this sedition? Is this inciting to sedition? I do recall that you had mentioned, please correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that it could border, ang sinabi niyo po, on sedition.
Yeah.
And I asked that to former Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo. Sinabi ko po sa kanya yung inyong sinabi. And he said this. Basically, he said, sir, you need to brush up on your law. Let's listen.
I think they should brush up with their law. What does sedition means? Sedition is persons rising tumultuously and publicly to attain certain ends which is enumerated under the revised penal code. Like yung prevention ng enforcement ng batas, despoiling, inflicting hate, mga ganon. Kailangan makapasok yun. Yung inciting, walang
Force or intimidation.
Pero, kailangan pa rin, ang nakalagay kasi, not being a part of sedition, which presupposes there is already a sedition. So how in the world can you be charging this president with inciting? Wala nga sedition eh. Yung sinasabi niyang bordering, he admits.
Bordering on sedition.
Kaya bordering on he admits na walang sedition. Bordering eh. Hindi
Papunta
sedition.
pa lang doon.
Papunta pa lang. O di walang crime.
Quick reaction, sir.
I exactly said bordering because we do not have complete evidence at this point in time to qualify this as sedition. But that's why it's bordering, because the main purpose of the statements was to withdraw support from the government. And the past President Duterte was claiming that there is a fractured government. And many people are watching, and I have to express that this is something unfounded. We have a functioning democracy. We continue to give socio-economic assistance. We give health services. The courts are open. Police protection is there. And all the services of a functioning democracy is there. And therefore, there is no need for the military to come in to remedy. That's the word that he is using. Remedy a fractured civil governance. That's why in the Constitution, the role of the military is to protect the people from physical harm. Nothing else. The economic side is being done by the Department of Trade, the NEDA. The social side is being done by the Department of Social Work and Development. The military has no role in that. And to get the loyalty of the military out, away from the commander-in-chief, constitutes sedition.
Here's a question, sir. Is he going to be investigated? The former president?
We have to continue to investigate because investigating the possible acts of sedition is intended to protect the state. So law enforcement agents, the AFP, the intelligence community will continue to investigate. We have to protect the state, the citizenry from possible attempts.
Pero ang NBI ho ba will look into this, will investigate it the same way that they already issued a subpoena to the Vice President?
You are referring to the particular utterances of past President Duterte?
Yes.
Yes, of course. We need to investigate that.
Is a subpoena coming? Ganun ba? Can he expect a subpoena soon?
I cannot say whether it will be coming soon, but remember that in the past, probably a few months ago, there were also some utterances invoking the possible participation of the military. And we have to take this in context with the present situation and the pronouncement of the Vice President that there is a threat to the sitting president.
So what is clear right now is that there's also an investigation ongoing with the statements made, regarding rather the statements made by former President Rodrigo Duterte. We await, sir, what happens tomorrow, the summon or the subpoena for Vice President Sara Duterte that she's commanded, tama ho ba yung ginamit kong salita, to appear before the NBI at 9 a.m. tomorrow?
Yes, there is a legal compulsion to answer to a subpoena.
All right. Undersecretary Andres, sir, again, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Thank you, Pinky, and thank you to all the viewers.
Thank you, sir. And that's On Point. Join us again tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. here on BNC, the Billionaire News Channel. I'm Pinky Webb. Thank you for watching.